what the kit looks like, okay? But first, I don't know why y'all are like less organized than the first two. Let me see who you are. So, tell me who you are. Madison. Stidham. Okay. All right, so I got Madison. Heather. Chloe. Okay. Beatrice. Okay. Cecilia.
Raquel.
Okay. All right, so Holly came at 8 instead of 10, that was awesome. Okay. All right, thanks y'all. Okay, so I wanted you to see the kid, so you kind of had a visual for that. So if you are, hopefully in the spring you'll be in classroom, okay? And you'll see this kit. Teachers do this in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, okay? And this year's a little crazy, like right now in schools, they have not done this because they don't have all their babies, okay? So, I don't know what it'll look like in the spring, but typically it's fall, then December, January, and then again in April, 1st of May. Because we're trying to decide, are our kids on grade level or where are they at that point in the year, okay? So the number one reason to give it is to determine level and specifically what level you need to teach your kids on. Okay, so if I'm a second grade teacher, I have second grade reading and writing standards that I have to teach everybody, okay? But you may be reading on a level D, and you may be reading on a level F, and you may be on an N, and you may be on an N, okay? So you will never, there's almost never nevers, okay? But I guarantee you that you will never have a class where everyone in your class is perfectly on grade level, okay? You're gonna have some here, you're gonna have someone here, okay? And so if I'm teaching second grade and I am teaching the reading standard of determining the main idea of a text, okay? I'm gonna teach that to all of you. And I'm gonna pull, like I'm probably gonna pull like a read aloud or something we know, go back to mentor text, I'm gonna say, okay, in the Junkyard Wonders or in Thank You, Mr. Falker, what was the main idea? Let's talk about that, okay? And I'm gonna do that for all of you, okay? But when it comes time to see if you can determine the main idea from a text, I need you to be able to do that in a text on your level. Because if you're up here, you need to be challenged to be able to do that standard up here, right? But if you're here, you probably can still determine the main idea if it's a text you can read, okay? So I'm trying to find the instructional level so I know where to teach the kids in my room, okay? So in that chapter 3 reading that y'all did on informal reading inventories, it talks about 3 different levels of text. Independent, which is what your kids can do with no help from you, okay? That's the level of text they should be reading at home by themselves. It's the level of text they should be reading if they're off in the reading corner reading in your classroom, okay? Instructional is what I'm gonna teach them. So if I'm pulling them for guided reading, or if I'm doing some one-on-one conferring with them, that one-on-one reading is always instructional. So think back to, I think it's your 2120 class, where y'all talked about educational philosophers and psychologists. Vygotsky, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Vygotsky talks about the zone of proximal development. And what that means is what's that level where if I teach the kid right there, tomorrow they can do that on their own. And that's what we're talking about. What's the instructional level? And if I teach them there, then tomorrow they should be able to read that book independently, okay? Frustration level is a book that's too what?
Too hard.
Too hard, okay? If I am a kid who's reading below grade level, everything else I do in my day is on my frustration level, right? So when I'm reading with my teacher, I should never have a frustration level text. At some point, I've got to have some happiness and something I can do, right? So that's the reason you need to know independent, instructional, and frustration level for your child. So this afternoon, I'm gonna start recording various kids in my neighborhood, okay? you're gonna be assigned to one of them as your case study student for the rest of the semester. Okay, so depending on who you're assigned to, when we meet virtually in small groups, you're gonna meet with, like, if all of you have Caden, you're all gonna meet together so we can talk about Caden, and we can also talk about what you're doing with the videos, okay? But just know, whatever kid you're assigned to, your small group will be people who are working with that same kid, okay? So when I'm working with him, Caden is actually one of the ones I'm working with. When I'm working with him, you're gonna see me do the running record, okay? So if I have him read, he's a 5th grader, so I may start him on like a P, okay? When I have him record him reading, I'm gonna be doing the running record, and I will have the forms for what I'm doing uploaded online. So you can print that out and you're gonna practice doing the running record, okay? Everything I do with him, you are also going to do with him. And I will have all the forms, instead of you don't have this box because you're not in school, so I'll have everything you need uploaded for you. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want you to actually see what it looks like. So I'm gonna give you each a folder. So it's basically a folder for every reading level, and it has 2 books in each folder. You may have multiple copies of one of the books, because if we were at a school, I would have lots of them for y'all to use. But you should have, oh, hang on. Yeah. You should have a fiction and a nonfiction. There's still skin there, I may have taken that one out. You should have a fiction and a nonfiction book at each level. You missing one? Yeah. Okay. What level is it?
R.
I have it. Okay, so I want you to notice a couple things about the book. One is it looks like a real book. I like that because it feels less like a test. A lot of informal reading inventories, a kid would just have a black and white passage, maybe pictures, maybe not, but it feels like a test. And with this, the kids should feel like I'm just gonna read a book with my teacher, okay? Down at the bottom, on every book, there is a book intro. This is the same thing that's printed on the top of your forms, okay? So for example, this one, socks, I can't, when the child is reading this, it has to be a cold read. They don't look through, they don't get to predict, we don't talk about it, I only read this part. And I'll say, today we're gonna read this, a book called Socks. Socks the cat was sleeping in lots of different places and the girl wanted her to wake up. Read to find out if Socks wakes up, okay? That's it. They can't get any other intro, okay? So, you always have the book intro here. It's also on your form, okay? The other thing you see on the cover is you see the level. See that little circle on the bottom right? And there's a white box underneath that. The top box says RW, that's running words. That's how many words are in this book total. And then the E underneath that is how many errors they can make and this book still be instructional, okay? Here's why that's helpful. Let's say I go to work with Caden today, and I've never worked with Caden. He lives across the street. His mama is a GGC alum. Thank goodness, she was in this class 3 years ago. But when I go to read with Caden, I've never read with him before, okay? And so I may start him in the wrong place, or I may, pick a book that's not appropriate. So let's say we get 3 pages in, and Caden has already missed 9 words, which is the max he can miss, okay? If that happens, he's getting frustrated, okay? And I know that this is not going to end well, okay? So I will probably at that point, I will at that point say, oh my gosh, buddy, I am so sorry. I picked the wrong book. Do you mind if we just put this one away and we find another one? Every now and then they'll say, no, I want to hear what happens, okay? If that happens, I'll say, okay, let me read it to you so we'll have time to do another one. And I'll go through it that way. But I always own it, because that's my fault, okay? The other thing, what I'll probably do with them today is there is this little skinny book in your kit that has just word lists. And so I will probably, since he's been out of school a while, I will probably do a word list to tell me what level I need to start on, okay? If you were in Gwinnett, you are almost never gonna see teachers use this word list, because what they will do is they'll say, well, spring level was K, so let's start there and see where they are, okay? But we've been out of school enough that we probably need to have a placement, okay? Does that make sense, guys? Okay.
So they read off of that list and that's how.
They'll read the list, and it's different for each one, but it'll basically say if they, you continue going up in word list, if they get so many correct, or you stop there, and then there's a chart that'll say, and when I do this, I'll actually, with my camera, show you what I'm doing, okay? It's a little trickier since you're just watching me, and y'all be patient with me, we'll see how this goes, okay? But yeah, based on how they perform, it'll say, yes, you need to start with level blah, 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 okay? One thing I have found though, he's a 5th grader, okay, so if I do this, it's probably gonna tell me a higher level text. So let's say a lot of older kids are really good at reading words in isolation, like they can decode really well, but usually comprehension is what's tricky. So if I'm doing an older kid and it tells me like start on level P, I will generally bump back a level or 2, because on this test is really strong in comprehension. A lot of times that's what will trip them up, okay? But anything I'm doing like that, I'll either tell you on the narration, or I'll tell you in small group why I did what I did, okay? We're gonna try to make it like we're actually sitting in a room with real people, we'll see, okay? But the kit, everything online, like all your forms, everything is actually have a spiral bound, and all teachers in Gwinnett County have one box that they share with one other teacher. Some schools have one for everybody, but definitely one that you're sharing with 2 people, okay? If you teach 3rd grade or up, you would have the same thing, just higher level text, okay? All right, so that's the kit. What we're gonna play with today is figuring out, we've done how to code, we've done how to do comprehension, and so what we're gonna do today is talk about how we know what to teach, okay? So when your child is reading the book and they make a mistake, we're trying to figure out which of the 3 cueing systems they used. What did they do? What were they thinking when they made that miscue, okay? So, there are 3, it's meaning, structure, and visual, and I always do it as a Venn diagram because I want kids right here in the middle. I want proficient readers can do all 3 of these, okay? So, y'all apologize, this is the 3rd time I've said the same thing, so I can't remember if I said it to y'all or if I said it to one of the other 2 groups. Did we talk about what most struggling readers say they do when they get stuck? No. Okay, what do you think? Kids that are struggling in elementary school, if you say, what do you do when you get to a tricky word? What do you think they're gonna say? What? Upper grade kids do, like middle grade, and some of them may. Some of them may close, right? Okay, so some of them, like upper elementary, for sure, will say, I just skip it. What do you think little people say?
Put a different word.
Maybe, ooh, that would be good. Y'all are throwing out some strategies. Typically, if you ask a little person, they will say, I sound it out. If you ask somebody's mom, what can you do to help your child? They'll tell them to sound it out, okay? And there's nothing wrong with sounding it out, right? There's nothing wrong with breaking up that word by sounds, that's phonics, okay? But it is not okay for the kids to only know that. Because all those kids who are struggling readers in elementary school and tell you their strategy is sounding it out, when they get to upper elementary or middle school, what are they gonna say, Chloe? Skip it. Because the words are too long. I can't sound out a 4-syllable word. It was not happening, okay? Last night I was doing 10th grade language arts with Luke, and we were reading an article about refugees from Afghanistan, and there were a lot of Arabic words that I don't know, okay? I can't break those down. I have no knowledge of Arabic. So, you know, that's what happens to kids. They get to middle school and all they know to do is decode. So phonics is hugely important. Do not ever say Dr. Coleman said phonics is not important. I did not say that. I would never say that. But it's not enough, okay? So at the end of the day, the very most important thing is meaning, okay? If they can decode it, but they can't tell me what they're reading, it really doesn't matter. I would say that they're not reading, okay? So, meaning is anything related to comprehension. So a little person who looks at the pictures and predicts the text. How many of y'all seen a real little, like a preschooler, who will take a book and look through and tell you all about what they're reading in the book, okay? That's using meaning, and that's a strong strategy. So when you're thinking about, is the child using meaning, you're asking yourself, did it make sense? Did that word make sense in the context of the sentence? Did that word make sense in the context of the story? Okay? So, meaning, anything related to comprehension. Structure is anything related to sentence structure. So, would it sound right in the sentence? Is it grammatically correct? Most of the time, if it makes sense, if a child says something that makes sense, it will also be structurally correct. They'll use meaning and structure together, okay? When this might not happen is if a child is acquiring English. English is not your first language. Typically, your first language has a different structure, and so this might be tricky as you're acquiring language, okay? Another time it will be tricky is if you have kids who get special ed services through speech or language, okay? Those kids typically will struggle with structure, okay? Other thing that happens sometimes is usually when I'm trying to figure out if something is structurally correct, I'll ask myself, did it sound right? But a lot of times, kids' spoken language doesn't match book language, okay? So think about just kind of that immature speech, you know, the way little kids might say something, just isn't structurally correct, okay? All right, but most of the time, it makes sense, it's also gonna sound right. Visual is not the picture, because picture is what?
Meaning.
Picture is meaning, picture is comprehension. So, visual is anything about looking at print, anything about how that word looks. So if they make the first sound, they're looking at the first letter. If they say was for saw, because it's all the same letters, okay? Or if they say something that looks like the same. Sometimes it's even like it's a short word and they say a short word, okay? When they're really starting to look at print, okay? So meaning, you're asking yourself, did it make sense? Structure, you're asking yourself, does it sound right? And visual is, did it look right? Okay. Questions? Good? Okay, we're gonna practice. So, I'm gonna give you each a sentence strip. Okay. Each have one. Okay, and what you're doing with the sentence strip is this. When the child reads the sentence, they haven't seen the whole thing yet, right? They've only seen up to that where they got tricked on. So let's say this sentence in the book says, father penguins carry eggs this way 4 weeks, okay? Do you know how father penguins carry eggs?
Between your legs.
They do, they kind of put them on their feet and they kind of crouch their body over them to keep them warm, okay? So, and that's what this book was about. But when my child said forever, they hadn't seen weeks yet, okay? So I can only analyze like what the child did, what they used up to the point of error. So right here, when the child reads, father penguins carry eggs this way forever, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does it sound right? Does it look right? You think they used visual information? It's not perfect, but can you see why they said forever for 4?
Yes.
So they used some visual information, right? Not enough. That might be what I want to teach them, right? But they've used all 3 cues. Okay, so if it's something like this, I might say, oh my goodness, that was so smart. You read father penguins carry eggs this way forever, and that makes sense, and it looks, and it sounds right, and it even almost looks right. Let's go back and look really closely at that word. Okay. What I don't wanna do is jump in right there and help them, okay? Because then, if I don't give them the opportunity to see weeks and realize, oh, that didn't make sense at all, okay? If I fix it right here, they've never had that opportunity to monitor and fix it themselves. And that, y'all, is what you are trying to do. You're trying to build independence so that they know if they read something, it doesn't make sense or sound right or look right, it is their job to fix it. So if I'm always in there fixing it for them, they're never gonna learn how to do that, okay? All right, so take a minute and look at your sentence strip and see if you can figure out what cues your reader used. And then I'm gonna have you turn and talk to a partner about them. And when you've had a chance to kind of look through it, maybe you two kind of face each other, and if y'all could just kind of turn and just face each other and talk about what you think your child did.
But I do think that focusing more on meaning and the instruction, it kind of sounds right.
It was like, Brett had a visual idea in my head. I need to get visual. Okay, we're good. Okay, so I think visual.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Oh, wait.
If you have one that does multiple errors, do them one at a time, okay? So like think of, talk about red for Brent first and then the next, yeah.
I think he's visual because all the letters are the same except for, like.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying, before then it looks right, right? And like, the rest of the sentence,